Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got a really critical topic on the table today.
We do. We're looking at Black Greek letter organizations, the whole pledging process, and, importantly, the very complex issue of hazing.
And our main source for this is, well, it's quite a significant book. Before You Pledge, second edition revised 2024 release by Dr. Michael J. Winfield, Sr.
That's right. And we're also drawing heavily from the Foreword, which was written by J.T. Ted Childs Jr. He has some really deep, multi-generational family connections to these organizations.
Yeah, so our mission here is pretty clear. We want to unpack the essential info from this book for you, the listener.
Basically, to help you get a quick grasp of the history, the dynamics of pledging, especially, with hazing as a factor.
And what it all means if you're thinking about membership, or even just for the future of these organizations themselves.
And the book, it doesn't really ease you in. The foreword hits hard right away.
How so?
It calls the book a generational stepladder for Black America. But then, almost in the same breath, it calls it a necessary look in the mirror.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful contrast right there.
It is. And Ted Childs, who wrote that foreword, he's speaking from deep experience. He's an Omega Psi-Phi member, family ties across generations in the Divine Nine.
The Divine Nine being the 9 historically Black Greek letter organizations founded mostly in the early 20th century, plus Sigma Pi Phi.
Exactly, and Childs just lays out this tension immediately. He says he is proudly and shamefully a member.
Proudly and shamefully, that phrase really sticks.
It's the core tension, isn't it? The book explores both sides. So the proud part, that's about the huge value these groups offer.
Right, the connections, the associations.
Yeah, Childs mentions lasting friendships. Like, he has a 59-year friendship that came directly from his fraternity experience. That's incredible.
And the book gives specific examples, too, right, of mentorship.
It does. It talks about really distinguished figures, Divine Nine members like Vernon Jordan, Earl Graves, Benjamin Hooks, all Omegas, and Dr. John Slaughter from Alpha Phi Alpha.
Described as, what, caring mentors, but also willing to give tough feedback?
Exactly. Real mentorship. And, the book's dedication itself speaks volumes.
Who is it dedicated to?
To the founders of the Divine Nine and Sigma Pi Phi. It honors their vision, talented, college-educated Black men and women serving humanity, fellowship, living their creed.
And it says their efforts weren't in vain.
Noble efforts were not in vain, precisely. It frames these organizations as monuments of Black achievement, a major spoke in the wheel of Black contribution to the U.S.
So a really strong foundation of pride and positive impact.
Absolutely, but then the book turns to the shameful side.
Which is the hazing. And it's clear this isn't treated like rumors or something vague.
No, not at all. The source says it's documented through the folklore and through multiple lawsuits. It's not hearsay.
And it confirms this behavior is part of the history, and crucially,
that in some chapters it continues is both true and preventable, which is pretty damning.
And that leads back to Ted Childs, the foreword author. He actually says he wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, despite acknowledging he personally gained confidence, perseverance from his own pledging.
He says
He believes those accomplishments are achievable without hazing. That's the key point. The abuse isn't necessary for the benefit.
Historically, though, the book notes it was sometimes seen differently.
Right. It mentions hazing being viewed as expected generational behavior, almost like a rite of passage, a socially accepted example of manhood.
Even chapter reputations like Mighty, Bloody, Sons of Blood and Thunder, those were apparently common and even revered back then.
Common and revered, yes. Which is a stark contrast to the founding ideals we just talked about.
The brotherhood, service, beating each other doesn't really fit, does it?
Not at all. And the foreword directly quotes one of the founders of Omega Psi-Phi, Bishop Edgar Love.
What did he say?
He recounted, "Frank, Oscar, and I, we loved one another, and it would never have occurred to us to hurt one another." He questioned how the motto, "friendship is essential to the soul," could be ignored.
And he put it in historical context, too.
Yeah, talking about 1911, when former slaves were still alive, he asked, "What kind of foolishness would it have been for one Negro to beat another?" It makes you think.
So how does the book explain this divergence, this shift away from the founder's intent?
Well, this is where the prologue introduces an earlier organization, Sigma Pi Phi, the Boule, founded in 1904, before the Divine Nine.
And they're presented as a sort of model, a lodestar.
Kinda, yeah. The book suggests their success in avoiding these issues later on came down to maintaining incredibly high standards.
How so? What were their standards?
Membership was strictly invitation only. Candidates were carefully examined and selected, and crucially, it wasn't just about grades.
No.
Etiquette, social graces, congeniality, those were required too. They were apparently very selective about character.
So a really rigorous vetting process based on more than just academics.
Exactly. And this sets up the book's concept of the candidate zero.
Candidate zero. Not a real person, but an archetype.
Right, an archetype, a type of person or attitude. The author argues that organizations founded after 1904, like Alpha Phi Alpha in 1906, started with high standards, but eventually
They slipped.
they abandoned their selection process's high standards, according to the book, and that allowed this candidate zero attitude to get in.
What defines this candidate zero type? What are the characteristics the book mentions?
It lists things like crude and vulgar speech and behavior, disrespect of womanhood, toxic masculinity, aggressively violent, a bully, and unfriendly.
That's pretty unpleasant.
And the kicker is, this type becomes the gift that keeps on giving brutal hazing practices.
So the idea is once these individuals got in, they perpetuated the hazing.
That seems to be their argument. The book uses really strong metaphors, like a highly contagious death-dealing virus or a termite eating away at the foundations.
Leading to tragic consequences.
Yes, an unfortunate loss of many lives. The core idea is that hazing wasn't inherent. It was an infection that took hold when standards dropped.
Okay, so that's the historical argument for how it might have started.
Yeah.
But the book also gets into the why, right? Why does it continue? Why do people participate?
Yes, absolutely. There's a chapter that draws on developmental psychology, social psychology, sociology. It tries to unpack the mechanisms.
Like what kind of concepts?
It talks about resocialization,
Hmm.
how joining a group can fundamentally change your sense of self and values, and how hazing can be part of that process.
So it might be tied into the very process of becoming a member in some cases.
Potentially, yeah. And it brings in classic studies like Milgram's work on obedience to authority.
The electric shock experience.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment on group conformity, suggesting that powerful psychological forces can make people do things they otherwise wouldn't.
It also touches on E. Franklin Fraser's work on the black middle class, connecting that to the origins or provenance of hazing.
Right, weaving together the historical, social, and psychological threads, it's trying to offer a multi-layered explanation.
And it doesn't shy away from the physical dangers either.
No, it explicitly mentions things like kidney damage or rhabdomyolysis, which can come from extreme physical stress like paddling, and it points out that there are laws, penalties for hazing.
This is definitely a lot for someone considering pledging to think about.
For sure. And the book directly addresses that. It includes a section called 10 Things to Consider Before You Pledge.
But the overall message isn't just condemnation, is it?
No, not at all. The book, and the foreword especially, emphasize that the Divine Nine have made creditable contributions. Their intent, their purpose, many members. They're good.
So the goal is constructive, to save organizations that we love, as the book puts it.
Exactly. But saving them means facing the tough stuff, confronting the history, acknowledging mistakes, and actively fixing them.
And there are specific calls to action.
Very specific. From the foreword, current members, brothers, and sisters need to say, in a non-negotiable voice, "This stops now. No tolerance."
Defining brutality as what?
Fraternal treason. And calling for people to report those who are guilty.
That's strong. What about the candidates, the people wanting to join?
The book puts power in their hands too. It says candidates must make it clear, "I will not tolerate hazing," because, logically, if there are not candidates, there will be no hazing.
That really shifts the dynamic. It puts the onus on the aspirants to demand better.
It reframes aspiration. It should be anchored in the spirit of the values and principles, not in, enduring abuse to get in. Learning is required, dedication is required.
But not at the price of your dignity or safety.
Precisely. And it loops back to Ted Child's reflection, his older, wiser self.
He couldn't justify subjecting himself to abuse.
Right, and that older self is expected to be a voice against such behavior.
And the book basically demands that voice be used.
Verbally and through action, yes.
So we've walked through the source material here. We've seen the proud history, the value, the contributions.
Contrasted with the really painful documented reality of hazing.
We looked at the historical perspective, the founder's intent versus this candidate zero idea, and how things might have gone wrong.
And touched on the psychological dynamics that might keep it going. Obedience, conformity, resocialization.
It's clear the book lays out very high stakes for the future of these organizations.
Extremely high. They're described as vital parts of the Black community, of the nation. But their future greatness, the book argues, hinges on this reckoning.
On acknowledging the past, truly living up to the founders' values, and taking a hard, active stance against the brutality.
Yeah, it's about ensuring their survival and relevance.
And this deep dive, well, it was really meant to give you the critical insights from this work. It'll help you make an informed decision or just understand the issues better.
And the source material leaves you with a pretty stark final thought about that future.
It presents two paths, essentially.
Path 1. The organizations are destroyed through the court process or through the public deciding we are not worthy of association. A bleak outcome.
And the alternative.
The hope that they will survive through generations of people wanting to become members and the society wanting and valuing the contributions of those organizations and their members.
So it really leaves you, the listener, to think about your own role, whether you're thinking of joining or are just part of the community watching in shaping which future comes to pass.
A powerful question to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for listening to this podcast brought to you by Quest Excel Multimedia LLC. If you would like to learn more about Black Greek letter organizations and their incredible rise to prominence in the early 20th century, as well as discover more about the 10 organizations that make up the League of Friendship, inclusive of the Divine Nine, please consider purchasing a copy of Before You Pledge, Essential Information You Should Know About Black Greek Letter Organizations, and the Dynamics of Pledging in a Culture of Hazing, by Dr. Michael J. Winfield, with a foreword by J.T. Childs Jr. available on Amazon.com. Or, you can leave a message on the message board at www.questexcelmultimedia.com. Please include your contact information, and we will take it from there. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.